All right, so for our last card, we're going to create this little cutie. Now, just because we're using stamped images doesn't mean the entire image needs to create the whole shaker card. We can just use part of a stamped image. So very first step, we are going to stamp and color this image. Make sure that your stamp is inked really well and center it nicely on your card front. Now, personally, ideally, I would love to have, say, the shaker image more in the center of the card, but that's not how this stamp is, so we are working with how it is. First thing I'm going to do is color the skin, and I'm using Copic markers to color. You can use whatever coloring form you would like. You could even watercolor like we did the first card. I wanted to have all 3 cards colored in a different way, so I chose to do Copics for this one. You could even use Tombow markers if that's your preference for coloring. I'm just putting a light coat of the first color down. Typically I would wait a little bit after stamping to let my ink dry, and obviously I didn't because I can see a little bit of streaking, but I'm just going to go with it because it's not too bad. So I'm just doing 2 colors for the skin tone. I've got E00 and E11, and I'm just putting the darker color where I want the shadow. So anywhere that the skin is going behind something, I'm going to put a shadow there. And I'm pretending that the light source is coming from above, so anything that's towards the top is going to be lighter, but right there it's going to be darker because there would be a shadow underneath the hair. I'm only doing 2 colors for most of the shading. For the cloth part I did do 3 because it just needed a little bit of a deeper red. But you can do more colors, say 3, or I've actually even seen people use 4 colors for doing shadows, just to get a deeper shadow in there. I chose to do 2 only to make it take longer to watch coloring. But if you did do the 3, what you would do is any place that you had the shadow, you would put the darker color in that shadow just a tiny little bit. I'm just going to do a little bit of this pink on the cheeks. Just give our little angel some rosy cheeks. And I'm going to go back over with the light color. And the nice thing I like about coloring with Copics is even though that is totally done and colored, is I can go back still and I can take my darker color and add a little bit more shadows. If there's some areas that I want a little bit more shadow, I can do that. Whereas doing coloring with dye markers, you pretty much have to color it quickly and leave it as it is, because the paper with the dye markers tends to start pilling, and it doesn't do that when we're working with Copic markers. So that's the main reason why you'll see me choose Copic markers to color over choosing a dye-based marker. So I'm just making sure. So these markers have, if you haven't used them before, they have a brush tip and then they also have a chisel tip. I always use the brush tip for coloring. It's softer and I find I have more control. It has a little bit of a pointed tip to it that I really like. These wings are actually going to have some stickles over top of them, so they're going to be nice and glittery. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing the shadow, just because you're not going to see a lot of that detail. Now we'll do when you see me pausing, I'm just making sure that I'm using the brush tip. For some reason, so the brush tip has the gray line, and I always in my brain think that's the chisel tip. I've always done that. You'd think after a while I'd learn, but I haven't. So this is the lightest red that I'm using. Oh, I forgot to color his knee. Or her knee, I don't know. We'll go back and do that in a moment. go. So for the cloth, very same principle as the skin. Anytime it's going to go behind something, it goes darker. Anytime there's a fold, it's darker behind that fold. But I am trying to keep the light from the top, so I'm trying to keep the upper part of that fabric lighter than the lower part. And for this one, like I said before, I just felt that it needed a little bit of a darker red just to give it some more depth. There we go. And now this is the medium color. I'm going to go back and blend where the lighter, or sorry, the medium and the dark meet. And then I go back over with the whole thing with the lightest color. And I've seen some people doing their Copic coloring that they just start with the dark color and work their way to the light color and just do it at one time. I've always been taught to do the light, medium, dark, and then medium light. But play around with both techniques and see which one works best for you, because just because there's a certain way to do something doesn't necessarily always mean that it works for everyone. So a tiny little bit of shadow where that little knee would go behind the cloth. And really I could have done that red as if the knee was stuck in the cloth, but I didn't want to. And then last little bit is the hair, and I've grabbed the wrong end of the marker. I chose to do brown hair. I kind of thought it actually should more be blonde hair, but in all honesty, the blonde colors that I've seen for Copics, they look more yellow to me, and yellow is kind of my least favorite color, so I didn't really want to give it yellow hair. But for the hair, I'm just pretty much doing little curl sweeps. The hair isn't the focus of the card, so I'm not spending a lot of time on it, but I do want to make sure that it's colored. We don't want to leave it blank. And I only chose 2 colors for the hair. If you wanted, you could add a third brown and give it a little bit more shadow areas. But I also didn't want my coloring to take up too much time. For the hook on the ornament, I'm just using a gold gel pen and going over that. And same with the little top part of the ornament. I just liked that touch of metallic in there. All right, so our coloring is done. We'll leave those there for the moment. So the next step would be to cut this part out. I am, like I said, going to put stickles on here, but we're going to do that at the very end. Otherwise, there's a chance that I will mess up my stickles.